This man was photographed in 1940 by the United States government in color. Nobody added that color later. So why is it that we remember that whole decade, every year of it, in gray? The Great Depression is the best photographed hardship in human history. Almost every frame of it reaches us drained of color. So we picture the 30s as a gray country. Gray dust, gray cues, gray coats, gray faces at a relief window. But gray was the film stock. It was never the decade. This wheat field in Oklahoma was photographed in 1939. Now, look at the same country in the same years on the other kind of film. The same agency that produced those black and white photographs also shot in color about 1,600 times and then filed the results. Same photographers, same assignments, same weeks, just a different roll of film in the same camera bag. These men are reading the news of 1940, chalked onto a newspaper window in Massachusetts. Notice the red. Because nobody colorized that. Nobody restored it. That red is the paint that was on the glass that morning. And once you have seen a few of these, the gray decade stops being a fact and becomes a habit of ours. So the question is not what the 30s looked like. It is why we remember them the way we do. The answer is a number, and it sits in the library of Congress's own catalog, written in their words, not mine. Between 1939 and 1944, those government photography units produced approximately 1,600 color photographs of the United States. In the same years, the same units, working the same assignments, produced about 171,000 in black and white. That is one color frame for every 100 in gray, so the memory was decided by arithmetic, not by intent. Because a memory is not built out of what happened. It is built out of whatever survives in quantity. 644 of the color photographs came from the Farm Security Administration, the agency of the Depression itself. 965 came afterwards, from the Office of War Information, once the subject had changed to war. Roy Stryker ran the first unit and kept a hand in the second, so the same eye governs both halves of the file. Most of the color is 35mm Kodachrome. A few are sheets up to 4 inches by 5. The library does not soften what that meant. Its own page calls the color work less well known. Less well known and far less extensive than the black and white photographs. Still their words, still on their own page. So the color was never hidden from anyone. It was simply outnumbered, 100 to 1, for 60 years. Now look at what those 1,600 frames actually kept, because it is not the thing you would expect. A mining town in Colorado, held between two walls of rock, photographed in September while the mine was still working. The valley below it, cut into fields, still being farmed by people who would outlast the ore. But 90 miles away there was a crop that paid better than ore, and here it is, crated in the row. Watch the fruit itself. In black and white it is only a shape on a branch. Here it is a season. That is what color does to farmland. It puts a date on the ground that gray can never put there. 2,000 miles north, sheep on open range, in the last summer before the draft emptied the ranches. One man is doing all of that work. The catalog does not give his name because nobody wrote it down. So we know the range, the county, and the year, and not the person. Hold on to that, it returns. In Maine, the fields are drawn from the air, potato country squared off neatly to the edge of the tree line. Then, at ground level, the same potatoes again, waiting in sacks outside a starch factory in Caribou. And when the weather arrives, the photograph stops being a picture of agriculture and starts being a picture of a place. Because this is what Gray actually took from us. Not detail, not faces, weather. A white fence in November light, and a harbor town in Connecticut that has not changed its paint since. Snow banked along the rails at Middleborough in an ordinary winter nobody at the time thought worth describing. But the mill towns are the real test, because gray is exactly how we were taught to see them. Brick turns out to be red. Company housing turns out to be painted. Smoke is brown and not black. Which means the misery we inherited from this decade was partly a decision somebody made about film stock. Not that the hardship was invented. It was not. But it was never only gray and never only misery. In New Mexico, the government followed families who had walked away from the dust and started again on high ground. They filed claims on high, dry land and built their houses down into it. So this is what a well looked like. And this is the county fair they made for themselves in the same year, photographed on the same kind of film. Then 2,000 miles east, a Barker works a Vermont fairground on the same sort of afternoon. But after Pearl Harbor, the same cameras turn away towards factories, railroads, aviation training, and women working. Chromite coming out of Montana, scrap metal out of Butte, beans canned in the field in New Jersey. Still the same collection, still the same file. The war did not open a new archive, it changed the subject. And the collection reaches further than the mainland does. Puerto Rico is in it, so are the Virgin Islands. These are American photographs of Americans, made in 1941, that almost nobody in the country has ever seen. Cargo going up onto a freighter at Frederiksted months before the shipping lanes around these islands closed. And here is a man the caption card calls simply a borrower. Jack Delano photographed him and moved on. So does the color make him easier to know, or does it only make him easier to look at? This is his lunch. Rice and papaya served on a leaf in the cane field where he was working. Now notice what has been happening to the color itself in some of these frames, quietly for 80 years. That pink is not a choice anyone made. It is the dye layer of the film, going, slowly, since 1939. But the library made a decision about that, and it is the most honest thing in this entire story. The scans are not color-corrected, not adjusted, not optimized to make the scene look better than it survives. They represent, in the library's words, the images as they exist in the collection at the time of scanning. So, this is not the 30s restored. This is the film, as it aged, shown exactly as it is. The first digital copies of these were made in the mid-1980s at a resolution far below this. Then in 2003 and 4, they were scanned again at 3,600 dots per inch, which means most of these frames waited more than 60 years to be seen at the size they were made. 1,600 survived. Not one of them was famous. Every one of them was federal and therefore free. And the catalog calls the first man Jim Norris. That is only what a photographer wrote on a card. This one, it does not name at all, but he is in color, and he is still here, and now you have seen him. If their story stayed with you, subscribe to Lost and Found Archives and help keep them from being forgotten. New faces from before living memory.